Good morning. It is Wednesday, September 21st. I had to look at my watch to see what day it was and what the date is. Rosh Hashanah fast approaching. And, today's story by Jonathan Rosen. Wait 1 second. The True World. First of all, when I Googled him, as I'll show you in a hot minute here, there's a Jonathan Rosen who writes middle school books. I'm like, yeah, that can't be him. And it wasn't. Here he is. This is the Jonathan Rosen that we're doing. He also wrote Joy Comes in the Morning, which at first I thought I'd read, but I hadn't read. It came out in 2014, and I may go back and read that. It looks pretty good. Now let's just see how old. Oh, he's 59. Just in case you were wondering, he's 59. So before we start the whole story and, going back to he's interviewing Saul Bellow, if you could interview any author who is no longer living, put it in the chat. Who would you want to interview? And then we can look at it. I'm going to put mine in there.
Wow.
Check off. Okay, thank Charles Dickens. Lynn, yeah.
I can't find the chat.
Okay, tell me who it is and I'll write it in.
Mark Twain.
Oh, Mark Twain. F. This is just so fascinating to me, and I'll tell you why in a hot minute. Judith, we can't hear you. Are you talking to us?
Virginia Woolf.
Oh, yes. I'll tell you why I said yes to that. I think.
Well, there you go.
Okay, if anyone, you can keep putting your names on there. So I was talking with my girlfriend who runs a lot of book groups, and she knows the author. I told her the premise of the story. And the thing that she brought up to me, and I didn't think about it until she brought it up to me, and you can look, is first of all the authors that, he goes back to see are men.
Yeah, that's why I picked a woman.
Thank you. And that's why I picked a woman.
Yeah.
And I was like, I didn't think about that. Not that Saul Bellows, and of course, in the structure of the story, he was assigned to interview him. But it's just fascinating that I think our mind, and of course, no one had, well,
bless you.
Bless you.
Jane Austen, women authors were not as predominant as the male authors. So, and it's maybe that's where our mind goes to first. So, tell me what you thought of the story, and then I have some questions for you. Elaine says we need to unpack it a little bit, that, how, the Omega magazine wants him to interview Saul Bellow. Lynn.
Well, the structure of the story is based on crossing over the river Styx and being accompanied by Sharon. So he's going into hell. I think this got the writers in a state of writer's block. But more than that, he's not looking for these authors. He's looking for his father.
Yes.
And I think he's in a state of immense mental confusion and torture. And I didn't think this was an easy story at all.
No.
So I think there's so many levels here the people that he interviews, he doesn't get any answers from them anyway. The answers are all in his own head.
Yeah.
If he could only find them. And then at the end, he said, I have to get back to work. So maybe something clicked when he made that mental journey. It's a mental journey. It's mental. What's the name of the station? Mental flight.
Yeah.
Mental flight. So to me, it's a mental journey.
Yeah. I agree with you. Judy Feldman.
I agree with a lot of what Lynn said, but I'd like to add that I honestly feel that when you have a story that in fiction that is this unmoored, there's usually a moral in it or a theme in it. And I couldn't find that here other than the confusion and the looking for his dad. But he doesn't get any answers. We don't have any answers. Usually there's some kind of a fiction gives you something. I couldn't find anything in this.
But what if that is the answer, that you can't get answers? You can't go back and visit,
I like that. I like that.
Right.
Alice.
Well, for me, what really set the tone for the whole story was that quote he had from Singer that, no doubt the world is entirely an imaginary world, but it's only once removed from the true world. To me, yeah, it was all in his mind. And I guess also the other thing for me was that at the very end, he says, somewhere hidden beyond it was my wife, my family, my future. It was time to get to work.
Right.
That he couldn't go back and find any answers, like you were just saying, Judy. He had to work through his life, and that's what's important, I guess.
Yeah. Susan, and then Judy Biederman.
So here's a thought. So what is the answer? Get out of your fantasies and get to work. Get into the last line is it's time to get to work. So you can have all these fantasies. You can imagine that you're meeting all these great authors. You can use them for inspiration, but in the end, and work is not fantastical. It's tedious and it's hard and sometimes it's boring. Time to get to work.
Yeah. Judy Biederman, then Evie, then Beverly, then Merle. Wait, Judy. Wait, I got to unmute you.
Oh, okay.
Okay, go, Judy.
It's really kind of depressing. It's supposed to be a comment on literature, and literature in contemporary times has actually died. And that I came away very depressed from that view of contemporary writing.
Interesting. So interesting. Evie.
Yeah, I don't mean to be flip or trivialize it, but I read it in the middle of the night, and my thought at the time when I finished reading it, it reminded me of this joke. I don't remember the details of it, but it was Sheldon looking for the Dalai Lama, and the punchline was, Sheldon, come home. And that was my thought right after, like, he was someplace looking for everything, and his mother was calling him to come home.
Yeah, that definitely could be. Yeah. Beverly, then Merle, Judy, and then Lynn.
I think that, I don't know, you can't speak for everyone, but I know that many of us wish that we had talked to our parents or our grandparents. We wish that we knew, it actually is very emotional. We wish we knew the stories. We wish we knew more about where they came from and what their life was like and what happened. And then it's gone and we can't go back and get it. We can never retrieve it. And it's very sad because he's looking for this father that he's looking for. And he can't find him. And even if he could find him, it would all disappear. So this is, I think if you were looking for a lesson in this beautifully bizarre story, I think that's the lesson really is you can't go back, but if you had a chance to ask those questions, do it
Yeah,
quickly.
yeah. Fascinating. Judy and then Lynn. Oh, wait a minute, Merle.
Oh, sorry.
Judy, then Lynn. Merle, go ahead.
Okay. He made some references to literature, and one of them was Saul Bellows Herzog.
Yeah.
And I went back and I kind of looked at the plot summary, and it was what Susan said, that this man is writing letters, but he never mails them. And he spends so much time writing and writing and writing. And finally, toward the end of the book, he comes to terms with his life and he stops writing these ridiculous letters that are never going to be sent. So it is about the piece of paper that he was given by Saul Bellow had 2 words on it, go home, where the wisdom that you're seeking from other people might actually just be much closer than you realize in your own life at home. And I thought the epigraph was very interesting too, because I've seen that a lot in literature more recently. Emily St. John Mandel wrote a book called Sea of Tranquility, where there's a suggestion that life as we know it is merely a simulation. And one of the characters in the book says, even if it is a simulation, it's worth living. So I thought that was kind of a good concept to bring in from Isaac Bashevis. And I just want to say to Lynn, I don't think it was hell. I think it was an afterlife, because he mentioned that Dostoevsky was
Right.
No, it was an afterlife. But
Afterlife,
I
yes.
mentioned this story to my husband. I said, I sort of thought he was going to go to a Jewish heaven. He said, no, it's a non-sectarian heaven. Because look at all those authors, they're all different religions.
Right.
Okay, now Judy.
Yeah,
Feldman.
I was going to mention, I was going to mention the go home, which were the only 2 words that he came away from the experience with in the printed on that piece of paper. And to me, home is safety. It's safety, and it's not. I was impressed with that concept of time to get to work, go home, go back to reality. The author seems to be telling us that reality has to be faced.
Yeah. True. Lynn and then Alice.
Here's another take that I thought about. And I had written down Journey to the Afterlife there, Merle. So I stand correct. I stand corrected there. I think he's facing his own mortality.
Yes.
And I think he's examining his life. And I'm going to go back to the writer's block. I think he's wondering what he's produced. What has been what legacy can he leave behind? And then he goes in his mind to visit all these phenomenal authors who have left all these other things. But I think he realizes he can't be those people. And to unblock himself, he has to go home. And that is the essence of the story, is the note. Go home. What does that mean? Go back to your own experiences. Go back to your own truth. And the title of the story is The True World. Okay, where is that? His home, where his family is, and the comfort and of your own truth. And you can't write a really, satisfying work unless you tap into your own experiences. I've read enough authors who say that when they start to go out of their own experiential world, it becomes more and more difficult to write. So I think he's just going on a journey to face his own legacy. What is he going to leave behind? All these other people have left things behind. They're not for him. It's not his world.
The interesting thing is, and I see Alice and then Judy Feldman, this was in 2010. He's, wait a minute, how old is he? I mean, he's 59. Like, he wasn't even 50 when he wrote this. So, those of us who were, looking back, oh, 50, that's super good. So I don't know that it's just another layer on this cake. Alice and then Judy and then
Yeah.
Merle.
Well, a lot of us have been talking about go home. And when I heard that, the first thing that entered my mind, and don't laugh at me, was The Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
Really,
Oh.
no, think about, and I'm borrowing from Lynn White's, who many, many, many years ago gave a speech in an organization that we both belong to. And the theme of it was about Dorothy going home, and that you don't have to look at all these other places. You don't have to look at all these highfalutin authors, whatever. What what you need is, people to love, a satisfying job, or job is maybe too narrow of a word, satisfying work. And it's hard. We all, I think of, oh, I'm going to find it in something else. But really, we have to look into our own hearts and into our own minds. And I can't, I mean, The Wizard of Oz, I've been watching it ever since I was a kid. And I haven't seen it recently, but I watched it many, many times as an adult. And there are a lot of the same messages in The Wizard of Oz at a different level. It's talking about a child, but children also have these, thoughts and issues. And I really think there's a parallel here.
He always had it within him. Okay, Judy Feldman, Merle, and then Evie.
I totally agree with the Wizard of Oz concept. I love that. I have a question though. On page 128, he's asking, what are you interested in? What are you interested in? And the answer was politics.
Yeah.
Can someone explain to me how he got to politics after he's dead? I mean, there are a lot of things that you come to when you die. People say, well, you don't regret not having missed work, or you don't regret certain things, or you wish you had done certain things. But after you're dead, politics, I don't know. I'd be sort of glad to be dead and out of politics. I don't know.
He didn't know that.
Remember, it's his mind that's creating the answers from these authors. So,
Right.
I mean, there's bizarre responses coming out of these people's mouths.
Really?
Yeah. Merle and then Evie.
When he first gets to the underworld, he's met by a man named Henry Roth. And Henry Roth wrote a book called Call It Sleep. I looked that up, and it turns out that book is about a Jewish boy who accidentally causes harm to one of his relatives by introducing her to a boy that he thought was a good person. Turns out it's a horrible person. And he's so guilty and miserable at the end. Finally, he practically dies on the railroad tracks, touching the third rail. And the only peace he gets is toward the end of the story, where he goes back to his mother and he feels something with his mother. Call it sleep. That was the answer to that. So I thought the irony of this, oh, and by the way, this author, Henry Roth, who greets him, says all of literature is something totally vulgar. He doesn't believe in literature anymore, doesn't care about it. And I thought the irony of this whole story is that while they're bashing literature as not being able to help you, it's through a piece of literature that this author delivers his message to us about going home. So it's this kind of ironic thing about why do we turn to literature? We find so much wisdom from it, and then he's bashing it. So I thought that was something to think about. Well, why do we still read literature? Why do we respect all these authors?
Right. I mean, he picked, Sal Bellows, Henry Roth. Those aren't people you just, pick up and read in an afternoon. They're usually assigned, or it's a classroom. I mean, but it's Jewish. It's quintessentially Jewish. And therefore in this anthology of short stories, perhaps, Evie. Wait, I'm on you. Yeah, there you
Just find that the whole concept of home such a charged term. I mean, home isn't always the panacea that we want it to be. And I think sometimes we're looking for how other people maybe adjusted to situations that maybe were comparable, maybe the contrast. I know just when you asked the question about authors, I didn't put anything down because the authors that I really read are psychological gurus, Brene Brown and a whole bunch of all those people, and it can vary from month to month in terms of who I read. And just even being so immersed this past week in TV, in terms of watching all of the funeral stuff, and then switching the last couple of nights to the US and the Holocaust. I mean, I'm just kind of emotionally all over the place and trying to come to terms with my own family that I never knew because they perished. And just trying to piece together, well, what is my home and how far back do I really want to? I've always tried to investigate and try to pull together little pieces. But sometimes I just want to say, okay, no, this is my home now, and that's history. But you can't really remove it either. And just the subliminal wishes, don't we all want at some point want to, wear the crown, how heavy it is, or so the whole idea of home in it. So it really charged a lot of almost superficial and depth and deep feelings for me at the same time while reading it.
Yeah. If you have the opportunity to watch Ken Burns' The Holocaust, it is excellent. I've watched most of it so far that it was on PBS. And Alan Green, a member, his son, Danny Green, who became bar mitzvah here, he is interviewed. And the people they interview are interesting. It focuses on the United States and our, Hitler looked at what we did to the Native Americans. I mean, it is absolutely fascinating. And in here, Ellis Island, in our story, Ellis Island plays a big part. And in on this Holocaust series, they show Ellis Island and people coming and the St. Louis being turned away, and stories that we know, but really in a different I don't want to say yes.
I've been watching it Sunday and Monday, and I'll watch it tonight. And I've taped the show too. I've seen so much about the Holocaust, and yet I learned so much more during this series. It's marvelous. Daniel is marvelous in this. And as far as the ship, the St. Louis, I had always learned things very differently. This tells the story, what really happened. I don't think most of us know that they wound up in Belgium.
Yeah. I mean, they had all the facts of who survived, the percentages of that. And so I think that that's all very interesting. But for our purposes today, the whole Ellis Island image is very, very strong. Alice.
Vanessa, to go along with that, exactly. I had watched the show and then read the story, and I think he says, I'm not looking at it, but I think he says something about it being enshrouded in the fog or something. And that's exactly what that woman said.
Oh, yes.
Brother, she said, we were told to get on the deck of the boat at 6 a.m. and there the clouds rose and we saw the Statue of Liberty. So it kind of gave me the chills when I read it in the story, because it was very
right
similar.
on page 129, the last paragraph. And Judy Biederman, I see you. So he looks at the note, which he knew he might get in trouble for. It says, go home. That was all it said. What could such a note delivered at such obvious risk mean? The oars with their swift mechanical dipping seemed to speak the words aloud. The last shreds of mist cleared, and I found myself looking beyond Ellis Island towards the bold, wounded skyline of Lower Manhattan. Somewhere hidden beyond it was my wife, my family, my future. It was time to get to work.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Ooh,
it does give me chills. Judy and then Lynn.
One of the things that fascinated me was when Bello said, everyone's an immigrant here. So then telling him to go home makes Evie's point really important, because if we're all immigrants, the people who are immigrants would like a home. They would like a home. So the people who are there are telling him to go home, but they're immigrants. And I thought that was an important, if not political point, observation.
Judy Biederman.
Well, the image of Ellis Island is totally reversed, because if you're an immigrant and you are coming into Ellis Island, that's a hopeful, optimistic, all of that. And that's really what Ellis Island did symbolize. In the story, it's the total opposite. It's going out to the unknown, to the lack of a goal, lack of hope. So I thought it was a good symbolism for what it was. Oh, okay.
We know we can still hear you.
It's okay. Go ahead.
All right. Lynn.
Well, you know what makes this class so fabulous is that when people say what, interpret, and then you start thinking about other things that you see in the story. And as we're reading this last paragraph, symbolically, when the mist clears, is sort of like an image of vision, your vision, that you're revising your attitudes, you're seeing things clearly. And what he sees is freedom. He has freedom to do what he wants to do. If you notice, when he first enters limbo, he asks who's in control. That's one of his first questions. And they say, that's not important. No one's in control. Well, I think he feels like he's lost control of his life. He's facing his mortality. He hasn't produced what he wants to produce. And he's come to the conclusion, why am I writing? And that's something Merle had said, why write? Why have literature? And I think after this journey in his mind, he realizes that there is a strong purpose in writing, and he has the freedom to write from his own soul, from his own voice. And it's a huge, another journey structure here. We've seen a lot of journeys. So I think he has come, his vision is now clear. He can go home and get to work because he has it within himself to tap into his own life. And I think I really have a new appreciation of this story. I have to tell you.
You have to go back. He somewhere, and I marked it, but he mentions everyone's an immigrant. And obviously today our news is filled with politicians sending people seeking asylum to Martha's Vineyard and immigration and border control. But I sometimes use the word immigrant when I'm talking about technology, that I am an immigrant to technology, where our kids and certainly our grandkids are native. It comes to them right away. They get it. It's so intuitive. I will never forget, they were looking for an assistant for me probably 25 years ago. And I said, the person has to know the computer. We still had computers. And this woman came on, and she came, and I knew it wasn't going to be a good fit, but she was like, I know how to turn it on. I'm like, that is not knowing computers. So, but I also think that sometimes you can get the feeling, and even working in the office, some of my younger colleagues, it just comes to intuitively. I'm good with technology. I'm good on the computer. But you can see what this, trying to being new and not knowing what to do, and how it can, whether it's a veil or the mist or whatever it is, it falls over you. Evie.
I feel like an immigrant when I'm talking to my kids. When they talk about the culture, the people they're talking about, the concerts that they're going to, the restaurants that they're just the buzz terms. And when I talk, I mean, I feel like an ancient, like a dinosaur from another age. Some of these values.
You're not alone.
My mother, and I thought, oh my goodness, I've become, but just kind of a dinner conversation a few weeks ago, and I did not know what they were talking about. But then I was talking to some of my friends about a week later on a Saturday morning, and they were in the same position, so I felt I have some kind of a kindred spirit. But so I understand what you're saying, Vanessa. On the other hand, growing up in the computer family, because Julian's been in technology since whenever, and just even the changes in terms of this other generation, this newer generation, I don't know what they're talking about, because that changes so fast. That culture keeps changing, the buzzwords, the terminology, just the devices and so forth. So I think being an immigrant is almost like an evolving kind of situation, depending where you are and who you're with.
I see Judy and then Susan, but my tip to you is when my kids say something I don't know, I bring up Urban Dictionary and type it in, and then you get the answer. So, because it's hard. Okay. I have, Judy Biederman, Susan Benjamin, Joyce. Judy Biederman.
Evie just triggered something for me, and that is the idea of obsolescence.
Mhm.
Or in the story,
I'm there.
has actually become obsolete, and we feel obsolete with our kids. But the truth is, it's kind of like the baby in the bathwater. You don't want to throw away the literature because it is still relevant. And so ignore those feelings. You are still relevant.
I think so.
Susan.
I really like what Evie said about being an immigrant, and thinking about being an immigrant is just being an outsider, trying to be integrated, trying to get in. I treated my own mother as an immigrant. She was born in this country. When she would talk about Facebook and call it Spacebook. So I would say this author, who now is in the company of Philip Roth and Saul Bellow, he wants to be in that group. He wants to be integrated into that group. But he has to come to terms with the fact that he will always be an immigrant. He will not, he may become an author, but he will probably never be in that group.
Interesting. Very interesting. And again, no women in that group. Joyce.
Very often authors write about what they know, or he had interviewed Saul Bellow before. So I think he's going to go back and delve into those interviews and perhaps look for a new take on what he had talked about with Bellow, and perhaps write about that instead of what he was trying to learn in the limbo state.
Very interesting. Sandy and then Elaine.
I had to laugh in the beginning when he talked about Saul Bellow, because I remember we lived on the far south side, 123rd, and I had read in the newspaper that Saul Bellow said in an interview that his favorite restaurant was Thai Sam Yan. So I looked it up, I found out it was on 63rd Street. And we started going to 63rd Street looking for Sal Bello. And one night he was there. When we were there, it was a very small restaurant, several blocks from the University of Chicago. And it was a very dangerous neighborhood. This was the late 60s. And the Blackstone Rangers they didn't shoot out of cars. They just used to shoot across the street at other people. And it was a very dangerous scene there. But we learned that if we got there, we would put the kids, our 3 little girls, in the restaurant and then go park and then come back. That's how dangerous that area was. But here we see Sal Bello sitting with other maybe professors or people from the university. He didn't have a wife with him. I know didn't he have several wives?
5.
Okay. Well, I never saw him with a woman. He was always with men professors or students when we were there. But we just thought being in this, and we never approached him. We just thought being in the same restaurant with Sal Bello was so special.
Well, I'm not gonna lie. Wait, let me just bring it up. I'm impressed you would recognize him, because I would have to Google that, which at that time I don't think you could. Like, what did he even look like? But maybe he was in the news more then. Elaine, go ahead.
Okay, I did not understand the story when I read it, but now I think that we all question what we do and what we're going to do. And I think the answer is just simple, that he went to famous people that he knew to try and get some information, and his mind just worked that way. And then said, okay, I've dealt as much as I can. I need to get back to reality and move forward. I think the story is just as simple as that. And I didn't get it until we had all of this conversation. But I think we all question what we do at certain times, probably every day.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, Lynn, and then Judy Feldman.
I want to piggyback on something Susan said. Yes, he will always be an immigrant, maybe, because if you think about immigrants, boy, they work their butts off to become assimilated and many of them become very successful. So I'm going back to this idea that what possessed him to do this journey? What was the motivation? And the motivation was a depressed state, a feeling of worthlessness, that he wasn't producing, that he wasn't satisfied with what he was writing, and he needed some kind of motivation to get back to his true self. And I think you're only going to be an outsider if you don't move forward. And those immigrants who give up, who say it's too hard, the fates are against me, those are the ones that don't succeed in America. It's not easy. And he said, it's time to get back to work, time to be to not be self-indulgent, self-pitying, comparing yourself to these famous authors who came out with gibberish most of the time. They had nothing much to say to him, and he had to talk himself out of it. So I feel that Elaine is right. We all go through that. What have I produced lately? What have I done lately? How does my life have meaning? What am I going to leave to my kids? That kind of thing. And that's, I think, what the story is about. He's just sunk into what afterlife is. I don't even know. We haven't even talked about what that means. If this is all in his mind, what is he picturing? Is he picturing being dead? Do you think he's on the verge of giving up? Maybe. So I don't know what you all thought was the tone of the story. Did you feel it was, that kind of where is he at his life that he feels he has to make this mental journey?
Yeah, yeah. Judy Feldman, then Judy Biederman.
You know, I honestly feel that he made this journey because of his dad. And he wanted to find out about his dad. And if I were the editor, I would have said to him, give me a nugget to understand your relationship with your dad, or
Mhm.
something about your father. Because in essence, Lynn, I agree, we have to figure out what he's looking for, but I think he's looking for his father.
Well, I thought the journey was for his father as well. I said that in the very beginning.
Right.
What does he want from his father? That's what we have to
Yeah,
discuss.
well, if I was the editor, I'd say, just give us a sentence. One sentence is all I need, but I need a nugget to get to the dad.
I think he has no closure with his father.
Right.
He didn't
Right.
have closure with his father for some reason. And this is
But we're guessing at all of that.
exactly. That's the beauty of the story.
Exactly. I have Judy Biederman, Beverly, and then Merle. Judy Biederman.
I agree. We're guessing, but all of his points of relevance are from literature. His whole image of the river Styx and the journey and the search, that all is from, yes, it's internal, but it's been a literary theme for a long time. And so it's easy for us to look at that and say, oh, well, he's trying to fit his father into that, but it's really very real in his mind. So it's kind of scary as to what we take from literature. We don't even know it.
Yeah. Yeah. Beverly.
We all look to learn from the past. That's in whatever we do, we study the past, but the truth is you can't live there.
Yeah.
The truth is that you have to have, everybody has to have a new chapter, and that's the future. And whether in this story, it's his wife and his family, and that's the future, and it's time to get back to work. But it's the last line that really applies universally, because the things we have to get back to are different for everyone. So we look to the past, but then it's time to get to work and live in our future and make our future. Otherwise we're in real mental distress forever.
Which he is.
Well, maybe he won't be. Maybe he'll snap out of it.
No.
Get a hold of yourself. Merle.
Hey, well, as far as the literature goes, Henry Roth gave him more advice than Saul Bellow. Henry Roth says
Yeah.
literature is for the living. I don't even know why you bothered coming here.
Mhm.
And they're all talking about, going as far as the end of the book, the end of the story, going home to but I thought you could really take the word home and really extrapolate much, much more from it than just
Right.
home to your family. I just read The Netanyahus by Joshua Cohn that won.
Did you like it?
I did. I loved it. I mean, my book club just talked about it for like 2 hours, and we loved it. But it's about assimilated Jews versus Zionist Jews, and are they even able to have a conversation together? And the Zionist Jews will say, we should all go to live in Israel. We should care more about Israel. And I started thinking that someone who read this story, who might be an Orthodox Zionist Jew, might say, going home means go to Israel. Care more about your roots. I mean, this is a Jewish story and a Jewish anthology. So I thought that might be another way to look at the end of this story.
Very, very interesting. So just a quick fact about him, and it's taking me a hot minute because Jonathan Rosen is a very common name, but these books are all by him. This article was, this story is from 2010, and these books are all in the early 2000s. Now, maybe he has some other books, but and I can't find a website for him, and but maybe the whole idea of writer's block and not knowing what to write, and going back, I think he has some New Yorker articles, which I didn't click on, but I can take a look at that in a hot minute. But it's Lynn said, he's troubled. He's definitely troubled, and looking for looking for answers. However, I do think the last line of, he sees the wounded skyline of Lower Manhattan.
Yeah.
I assume that's
Right.
talking about the World Trade Center's not being there, but that's Vanessa.
Right.
And somewhere hidden beyond it was my wife, my family, my future. It was time to get to work. I do feel it's hopeful in the end, that I feel like he's going to go back to work. I guess if we checked in on him in however many months, I don't know exactly where he'd be. But I do feel that part of it is hopeful. Another thing I noticed, let me pull up my notes. Why do you think, so he can't take any baggage. So is that emotional baggage? What, he can't take, and he was packed and ready to go, and he sees other people's baggage. He sees it waiting. Does that mean that that's their emotional baggage? And why is nothing written? He doesn't get any other signatures. Like, why can't he write anything down there? Thoughts? Merle.
Well, when you go into the afterlife, you can't take it with you. You can't take anything with you. And that's what he's doing. He's visiting. I'm surprised they even let him take the pencil and the pad of paper, because you
They didn't.
can't take it with you.
They didn't let him take the pad and paper.
I think he snuck that on.
Oh.
Susan and then Lynn.
Well, maybe he couldn't take anything with him because he was not going to be allowed to stay. He was there, he had these interactions, and then he left. And I really agree with Vanessa. This is hopeful. This guy, I think it's like a dream. Like, I'm going to meet all these great authors. Maybe I'll even meet my father, which he doesn't do, but it's a dream. And then you realize, well, I'm out of the dream now. Reality isn't so bad. And if you want motivation, if you have writer's block, get a deadline. Go back to work. And a deadline will motivate you. That's real.
Absolutely. Lynn.
Okay, so I'm seeing something different here now. I think that he's trying to get rid of his baggage. And he's really on the psychiatrist's couch, and he's in his dream world. And he's going through, the psychiatrist is helping him. And if you notice at the end, the mist is clearing, but he's still seeing that wounded skyline. So he's not there yet. He is not there yet, because somewhere hidden beyond it is my wife, my family, my future. He's coming. I think he's working out these psychological problems. I do see optimism. It's time to get back to work. I see now that maybe it's time to get back to work on myself, to get myself out of whatever mental state I'm in now, and get rid of my baggage and start moving forward to the future. So that's a totally different interpretation of this.
Alice. Wait.
Sorry, I
There you
didn't
go.
really to myself. A couple of things. One, in response to what Merle just said about going back to Israel, when he's talking, this is on page 128, when he's talking to Bello, they're talking about his book To Jerusalem and Back.
Right.
He says, has your thinking changed since that book?
That's
And then
right.
Bello says, I never should have left. And it was unclear. Did he mean Jerusalem, Chicago, the earth itself, or whatever it was in the afterlife? Well, I think that does speak a little bit to the whole Jerusalem, Israel issue. But also, to me, it's just another way of Jonathan Rosen showing you can try to find, you can read all the books you want, you can interview all these authors, but in the end, you have to look inside yourself. That to me, because it was unclear to me. Did he mean Jerusalem, Chicago, the earth itself? Look at all the different interpretations that we all come up with when we're reading these stories, which are all good. I mean, I'm not saying anything bad about it. I think it's wonderful. But really, you have to look, we all have different circumstances. We all have, different lives. Even some of them are a little similar, but we're all unique and different. And again, I think it goes back to you have to look inside yourself. And in terms of his father, he was told not to talk to anybody else. There were only certain people he could talk to. And he says, "Father, is that you?" And then there's all this blinding flash. I felt a jolt. So, I think Evie said some stuff, and I think Beverly said some stuff about this. Yeah, you want to get answers from that other generation, but you're not going to get real answers from them in terms of what you should be doing. You can find out more about their lives, but I don't know if you're going to get answers. So that's my thing.
Judy Feldman.
I think when we read an author, we bring ourselves to the story so that it's not necessarily just the author. For example, I've read the book Passages over 5 decades. 6, I lied. And every time I've read it, it means something different to me because everything that it describes, I put myself in there and I put myself into most stories that I read. It becomes part of me. So I think his bringing up all these authors is important because he thinks they're important, but I think what he is looking for is inside. He's looking for inside.
When no one said, "Wow, this was so confusing. He's interviewing someone who's dead." And the first sentence is, when you look back, when the magazine Omega asked me to interview Saul Bellow, and of course we all know he's dead, I jumped at the chance. Bellow had been dead for less than a year, and this would be his first major conversation since departing. None of us said, "Well, the premise of that story is crazy." I'd interviewed plenty of writers before, but there was no getting around the fact that they were alive. I was eager to reach a more mainstream audience. What does that mean? There were still a few old-fashioned periodicals that dismissed these pieces as obituaries. But now that literature was finished, more and more magazines were realizing they couldn't do without them. Clearly, the future was with the dead. Judy Feldman.
I remember reading the first 2 sentences and I turned to my husband and I said, "This book club class is going to be crazy." I thought it was totally nuts.
Right.
But I have to add something, which is a little off topic, but I'm reading a fabulous book about the women who started the CIA.
Oh, yeah.
What's it called?
Awesome. It's on my phone and I'm talking to you on my phone, so I can't find it right now, but I will send it out. It's similar to the women who were helpful getting the rockets off the ground.
Yeah.
And it has that same feeling, but these were much more dangerous. They risked their lives. And they were never, historically, men who started the CIA had biographies written about them. None of these women did.
Is it Breaking Cover?
No.
A Woman of No Importance?
No, the great girls or the
Wise Gals?
Yes, Wise Gals.
Okay.
It's awesome. It's so
I'll
awesome.
put it in the chat.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, here we go.
And many of them were Jewish.
Really?
Oh, interesting.
Several of them are Jewish.
Very interesting. Okay. So
Merle has her hand
Oh,
up.
Merle, go.
Just one little comment about the story. Magical realism is very
Right.
common in other literatures. If we were reading any kind of Latin American literature or Spanish literature, anything like that, South American, we wouldn't think twice about it. It's just
Mhm.
that in American literature, North American literature, we don't see magical realism very much.
And you know, in that you bring that up, Merle, because I've reviewed some books in my book club with that have magical realism, and people are so turned off by it. And I think it's because they're not used to it. Though I had a discussion with Susan last night about the story, and I used the phrase the willing suspension of disbelief. And that's when I started reading the story. I said, oh God, another magical realism. And then I said, nope, I don't think that's it. I think I have to just suspend disbelief that this could happen and somebody could interview somebody who is dead. And it's just a vehicle for his getting his point across.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had my evening book club read some the Winter Sisters, and there's some nice magical realism with Jewish folk tales, and I Vanessa enjoy it, and some people you either like it or you don't like it.
True.
So and as we get to the Elaine.
I think we're all forgetting that we have dreams. And could this have just been a dream of his? That, you know, I mean, I dream sometimes about my mother and, you know, conversations and ridiculous things that happen. So this could have all been just a simple dream.
I didn't think about that. Yeah. Abby.
Yeah, I don't know the term magical realism. I never heard it before, but all I can think of was when I was doing a thing on adult fairy tales, and the definition that somebody gave or the interpretation was that all of it is true and some of it really happened.
Well, I like that. I like that. I do have to share one thing. So when I was thinking about what author I would like to talk to, and I tried to go for a woman author, and then I picked Jane Austen, but I realized as we're talking, you know, that was my dad's favorite author, you know, and he just, you know, died in April, and, you know, subconsciously, you know, like if I talk to her, would I see him anyway? Our brains, you know, it can take us to many wild places. And I thank you for this morning's discussion. I always take so much away from it. We're off for a little bit longer just because the next time we meet, it would have been Yom Kippur. And hopefully, you know, we'll all be in synagogue. So we meet again October 19th. And it's just great seeing everyone. Shana Tova, Happy New Year. If you need anything from me, just let me know. Great to see you. Be well, and hope to see you in person.
Happy New Year, Jeff.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Vanessa, will you stay on? Will you stay on for a second? Okay.
I will.
Okay.
Oh, you know what? I'm going to stop the recording. I have to wait a minute here.